Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now, for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time podcast. And today, Rabbi Londy, you and I are going to be talking about something that comes from our ordaining institution, from Hebrew Union College, which is the sole seminary of the Reform movement, and a conference that you and I attended last week, the third conference of Recharging Reform Judaism, which is focused on a range of issues around Reform Judaism, but really the most important, or the one that stands out the most, is the idea of the centrality of Zionism to Reform Judaism. And in this conference, the big question that everyone's been talking about, that's been getting a lot of press, is should there be standards regarding Hebrew Union College when it comes to ordaining clergy regarding support for the existence of the state of Israel? Should HUC be open and willing to ordaining anti-Zionist rabbis? And we're not talking just about people who are critical of Israel. I think you and I could talk all day. We've had many of these podcasts when it comes to criticizing Israeli policy, but fundamentally, the idea that of a nation state for the Jewish people, should that be a core principle that one must adhere to in order to be ordained as a rabbi? So you and I both had time at this conference and have been involved in conversations since. Let's just start off with, where are you at in this deliberation at the moment?
I'm really happy that we're having this discussion. There's two core values of mine that I think are at odds with one another. Number one is a sense of Ahavat Yisrael, like love of Israel and for the people of Israel and for the safety of Jews. And I think that part of the current safety of Jews around the world is the existence of the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. And so that's my starting point, that Israel is not just a place that we love and deal with and figure out how to be in conversation with, but it's also for the security of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of that is I'm very much a liberal in terms of the way that I perceive myself in this world. I am open to all opinions. I believe in discussion. I believe in the exchange of thought. I believe that there are no ideas that should not be put forth, and all ideas should be discussed and have a place to be discussed.
Right.
What is being brought up in this institution, though, at Hebrew Union College, HUC, is whether there needs to be the acceptance of those who have different ideas about Israel or don't believe that Israel needs to exist in its current form, whether there's even a place for them. So on the one hand, President Rayfeld, who is the president of the college, has said that there is a need for all ideas to be acknowledged and to be respected and to have a thoughtful discussion. And he said something interesting, that we can't, if they're already through our door, we have the opportunity to educate them. Being in Israel is actually one of the things that you have to do as part of the HUC program. But I think it made a lot of people feel uncomfortable that was not a requirement for becoming a leader of the reform movement, is saying that I believe that the state of Israel can and should continue to exist. So I'm here with both parts of my heart, a staunch believer in the state of Israel as an Israeli, and a staunch believer in all ideas need to be discussed and worked at. A seminary is a place that I think cultivates thought and opens thought. The problem, however, is that a lot of those people are graduating and going into the workforce and are becoming leaders of synagogues and leaders of Jewish institutions.
And are signing on to letters as a rabbi.
And signing on to letters as rabbi that I think go against core principles of what it means to be Jewish. And so, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. It's not like a yes or no, right or wrong. It's very nuanced, in my opinion. Where are you here?
I think it is such an interesting fulcrum pressure point to so many issues that the reform movement is dealing with. I think that for context, our listeners should know that there is a lack of students applying to
True.
not just HUC, but to non-Orthodox seminaries throughout are really struggling in order to bring in students and to fill positions. So that's one piece of this, right? And then in addition to that, you have somewhat dwindling congregations in the US, although thankfully ours is not one of those, but the worry about what are the jobs going to be and are those jobs going to be at synagogues? You also have more and more people going into the rabbinate, I would say, who are not looking necessarily at congregational life, but are looking to become thought leaders and institution leaders and organization leaders. And I would say one of the biggest differences that we have that was articulated by the students who were at this conference was the abundance, the majority of those students entering the HUC now who claim that their central motivating factor was to have a pulpit for social justice advocacy versus for Jewish learning, Jewish communal building, prayer, serve as a prayer leader, that people are entering more and more into the rabbinate to have a platform in order to deliver their viewpoints. And so all the more so, viewpoints which don't support the principles of Reform Judaism are incongruent. And finally, I want to note that the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Reform Movement's rabbinic wing, does publish a platform every 25, 30 years or so. And the newest one, most recent one, is from 1999. And in that, it makes it very clear the idea of Ahavat Yisrael, of supporting and even encouraging Aliyah to the land of Israel, to ask that the people in Israel fully ensure the promises of the Declaration of Independence regarding pluralism and democracy and inclusion and defense of minority rights, things that we talk about all of the time. And you would think that the ordaining institution would try to prepare its students to serve the mission as stated in the current platform. For me, it doesn't make any sense to allow and to prepare students who do not understand or agree with the core principles of the movement. In the same way that if someone said that they accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, that is not part of our platform of Reform Judaism. And so you at some point are Yotze, you're outside of the specter of the organization.
Well, I think that that's one of the big issues that's coming up, because there has been discussion around whether there can be a litmus test to your Zionism. Can you even ask the question, are you a Zionist or do you believe in the state of Israel? And the answer that has come back from the institution is we don't have litmus tests, which is not true. There are many values that allow you to be in or out of the institution. You can't be homophobic and be an ordained rabbi at HUC. You can't be
at least outwardly so.
Outwardly, you can't be discriminatory of different races and be ordained at HUC. So there are certain core values, and I think what's troubling for me is that these rabbis are like separating liturgy. They're separating with like Torah. They're separating the prayers somehow, and they're bifurcating these two issues of like the entire structure of what they are learning as Jews is around conversation with Israel and love for Israel. And so what are they even doing?
Yes.
What are they coming out with? What is their goal? What do they believe will keep Jews safe in the world? What do they believe the mission of the Jewish people is? I don't know that. And so that's troubling for me, that an institution that I was ordained at in Jerusalem, which was one of the first seminaries to have an Israeli campus, because Israel is a core value to Hebrew Union College, that there's even discussion about the legitimacy of it. And even more so, I heard troubling stories. And again, this is hearsay. I wasn't there, but I heard troubling stories about students who spent their year in Israel just being outwardly antagonistic and disrespectful to professors, to fellow students, to people who were in conversation, maybe critically, maybe not critically, with the state of Israel. And that's also bothersome to me and troublesome. It's one thing to have discussion. It's another thing to have discussion in a disrespectful way. So again, that's not necessarily corroborated evidence that I have, but even to hear it makes me uncomfortable and sad.
Right. And there were even the more extreme examples that were anonymously shared were, of a student who was refusing to say Kaddish at the Nova site, the site in which 300 something Israelis were murdered by Hamas and has become a living monument to them. A student who won't stand for Hatikva, who openly opposes the Israel's national anthem. These are, I think, I would find to be personally offensive in terms of what does it mean to be a Reform Jew? And much as someone crossing themselves on the bima would, for me, take you outside of that. I do want to say I've been in conversation for some time around this with Dr. Reffeld. I find Dr. Reffeld to be authentic,
Yeah,
articulate.
agreed.
I openly I think we should celebrate and honor the fact that he enters into these conversations. He puts himself in the lion's den. He is speaking, he knows, before a often unforgiving crowd. Some even booed him at this conference when he was speaking. I thought that really that was beneath us that someone did that. And I actually wrote to him about this, and I compared him to leaders of other major reform institutions who spoke at the conference and who completely ducked the material and gave flowery poetic speeches of empty calories, of nothingness, and were seemingly hoping to run out the clock and not to actually have to talk about the real issues at hand. And opposed to them, Dr. Redfeld is always available, sits, will hear, will push back, will question. I find his leadership of this process, even if I disagree with where he stands on this, I find him to be modeling rabbinic behavior better than some of the rabbis themselves are doing.
I agree with you. I think that, everything is stereotypes. It's how we treat others, and we rise and fall ultimately on that. I've always found him to be, he's incredibly articulate with the best voice in the reform movement.
Yes, he'd be a great podcaster.
Such a good voice.
Yes, he would.
But what I like so much about the discourse that he is a part of is he really wants us to be an exchange of thought. He wants us to be thoughtful, informed Jews, informed choice, that we make decisions based on intellectual pursuit, that we challenge one another, and that we do so all under the umbrella of being a Reformed Jew, because that's the core principle of the Reformed Judaism is we challenge one another. We don't take anything at face value. We're really an anti-establishment movement of an anti-establishment religion. I love that all in principle. I like it even beyond principle. I like it in ideology and in practice. But it really, really, really makes me uncomfortable. And I don't know what the future of movements are in Judaism in general, and we've talked about this, but I think that this is going to be a moment where there's not even going to be a level of cohesion that can hold movement together when you have rabbis who believe in the state of Israel and you have rabbis who do not believe in the legitimacy of the state of Israel. I don't even understand what that means.
I think that part of the issue is that inherently a rabbinical school sits in two worlds at once.
Mm-hmm.
A seminary, a yeshiva as we know it, is a Jewish institution, but not necessarily a liberal institution. Right? A yeshiva has very core principles, and you have to believe and follow certain strict things in order to be ordained. If you want to get smicha, if you want to get rabbinic ordination from a yeshiva, pick your yeshiva throughout the world, you have to agree to their doctrine, to their principles. At the same time, HUC is a graduate school, and to get an MBA or an MA or something that you want to do, to pick whichever kind of graduate program you want, that is a liberal institution, yes, which prioritizes viewpoint diversity, right? And not having set paradigm or set principles of the movement. HUC is both.
Yeah.
It's why we get a master's degree at the end of 3 years, and then we get smicha at the fifth year. It's kind of this dance, this compromise between the two. And I think that the question we're asking is almost trying to prioritize between, is this a yeshiva seminary or is this a graduate school? And I think that coming from a graduate school, from the university background of George Washington University, of WashU, in St. Louis, that I think that Dr. Raphael is siding on that side, and others are saying no, that the seminary yeshiva aspect of HUC should be the priority over the secular liberal graduate school elements of HUC. I think that's the civil war going on here.
I think that's true. And it's interesting. The Israeli program, which used to not really be connected at all to the American program and has become more central for a lot of reasons. One of them being, I think Dr. Raphael does want to create connection and cohesion between Jews in Israel and Jews in the diaspora, but it's actually not a graduate program. And there, it's very much a seminary. It's very much a spiritual pursuit.
How about the education program at HUC? What's that?
That is through Hebrew U. The accreditation
Got it.
So everything is through a university. They're trying to get accredited, but that's a difficult pursuit. And so they have more permission to lean into whatever values they're trying to promote.
Got it.
And I think that also creates a divide. I've spoken to some of my Israeli colleagues about it and what their feelings about it. And they said it's very uncomfortable to have to, on the one hand, they probably...
Go ahead.
On the one hand, they probably agree with a lot of the politics of those. Israelis particularly probably agree with a lot of the politics of the very leftward leaning anti-Zionists. Because they're living the frustration of the state of Israel. On the other hand, they're deeply offended. They're saying, how can you have no skin in this game.
Yes.
You have no skin in this game. You don't know what you're talking about. You might be right in terms of your analysis of a situation, but we're here trying to fix it. We're here trying to do something with it. You don't give up on the project just because it's hard. You work at it, you cultivate it, you engage with it. This is a binding factor of what it means to be a Jew. And so I'm confused because I don't understand what holds them in, what roots them in the ground as Jews. I think this is, even though Israel makes me crazy and I love it and it's heartbreaking and it's beautiful, it's all the things, I still place myself as part of the Jewish people conversation with this. I don't cancel it. So I don't understand. I don't even understand what the conversation that they're having is.
I think that Theodor Herzl was incredibly naive when he wrote and thought that by creating a state of Israel that he would solve anti-Semitism because suddenly the Jews would not be landless, they would not be unique. I think it is equally naive for people today to be saying that people wouldn't hate the Jews so much and anti-Semitism would go away if Israel no longer existed, and that Israel is the source of that anti-Semitism. It's just turning Herzl on its head, and both of them I find to be equally uninformed opinions.
You know, there's definitely a generational divide, no doubt. And I think that I'm old enough. I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to have historical memory, to be raised in the shadow of the Holocaust. And I think that this generation, which is, that's crazy, almost 20 years younger than me, 15 years younger than me, they're like a little bit past it, that they don't have that memory. And I'm not saying that we make our decisions based on historical persecution and trauma, but I do think that they have the privilege of never having felt, what it means to not be safe, that they can have these ideas and feel that those represent them and their social justice values better than the state of Israel.
It's why, for example, there's no such thing as a Sephardic anti-Zionist, because every Sephardic Jew has a much more recent memory of what it's like to be persecuted and landless. I want to go back to this conversation with Dr. Raphael. So Dr. Raphael says that a student coming in, they have 5 years, they could learn a lot, maybe they'll change over that time. So I asked him as a follow-up, well, how about then before ordination? Week before ordination, someone says to you that I fundamentally don't believe that there should be a state of Israel. It doesn't have a right to exist. Do you still ordain that person? Now at the end of 5 years. And he said, yes. I mean, that's the liberal answer to have. And I said to him is, the frustration I have is that what you're basically saying then is I can no longer rely upon HUC as a quality stamp, that if it's an HUC rabbi, I can rest assured that this person is going to at least have a foundational understanding support of the state of Israel. And if you're going to forgo that, if you're going to punt it, now it becomes my problem. Now when I go to HUC to interview potential interns or potential rabbis or cantors, I can no longer assume that that person shares the core values of the reform movement as stated in the platform. So now I got to do digging and I have to sift through candidates and make sure that it's someone that actually comports with the values of our movement. And I take umbrage. I'm frustrated that I have to do that. I think that's HUC's job. Shouldn't when you are ordained as a rabbi, the institution is saying like this is a representative of who we are and the best of what we want to be. And you can't do that if there's no boundaries whatsoever, and anyone who gets into the program automatically just gets ordained. I used this poor analogy because this talks about graduate schools versus seminaries. I said, imagine that I'm Clorox and I'm going to go interview at an MBA program for business school. And I find out that at the business school that there are students all over the place who espouse communist economics. And they believe basically in the warm embrace of collectivism, of communism. That's great. They're not fit to work at Clorox when I'm trying to deal with supply and demand and trying to sell as many detergents or whatever cleaners I'm trying to do. I will then go to another business school and I will no longer hire from your school if you're teaching your people a form of economics which is contrary to the world that I operate in. I said, but the problem is that I don't have other schools to go to. HUC is uniquely the seminary of the reform movement. And now there is competition from outside non-denominational ones.
Who are unapologetically Zionist.
How sad it is then that maybe that we'll have to look at non-reform seminaries in order to best fill spots in reform institutions that want to support the reform platform when it comes to Israel.
Well, I don't know this, and I probably should have looked this up before. But what are the trends showing in terms of reform communities? Are they leaning more towards an apathy towards Israel, anti-Zionism, Zionism? I mean, I know in the world that you and I live in, Westchester is explicitly Zionist, and that is, comforting in that way. But what do the trends show?
I think it follows national sentiment as well. And I think that there's a lot of Jews in America who have deep criticisms for different policies and politicians, certainly in Israel. But I think the latest polls are 85 to 90% of them. Now, what's interesting is it depends on what question you ask. If you ask them, do you believe there should be the Jews should have a right to live in their ancestral homeland? It's around 85, 90%. If you ask them, are you a Zionist? Only 1/3 will say yes, because there's been such an effective misinformation campaign of what Zionism actually means. And that's why we need strong leaders. But to your question, I want to sort of ask a question back in reverse. Dr. Reffeld says that, well, these people will graduate and then they're going to go to institutions and they're going to have to learn how to deal with those institutions and comport with the values of those institutions. But isn't that a two-way street? Rabbis, cantors go to synagogues and they also influence the character direction. They teach the kids, they give sermons on the bima. Aren't we here supposedly to help to guide the congregation in a certain direction? And if HUC is ordaining all of these anti-Zionist rabbis and cantors, and if they are taking that pulpit and pushing their congregations in that direction, then don't you think the movements are going to change? The congregation is going to change as well. And here in Westchester, we have the privilege. We get to choose from fantastic candidates, such as yourself, when it comes to looking at rabbis. What if I'm a small synagogue not in a big city, maybe in middle America, and I want to hire a rabbi, and this person has great education skills and maybe has great presence in teaching, maybe is a wonderful shliach tzibur, a prayer leader, but is anti-Zionist. And now I have to make that choice of like, well, is it good? It's better than having no one, I guess. I think by HUC refusing to take up the responsibility to attest to the basic qualities, values of the clergy, I think that puts congregations and organizations in a very vulnerable position to fight for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a chicken and egg situation right now. Who pushes who forward? I agree that by allowing more rabbis into HUC or allowing more students who do not see Israel as a core principle, it will absolutely change the face of the movement. I think ultimately that makes Jews less safe. I think it makes Jews less safe because we get too comfortable in a situation. It's extreme assimilation. We find ourselves believing that we're one amongst the regular, and then we find out that we're Jewish again.
Yeah.
I'm so surprised that this generation's reaction to October 7th is their anti-Zionist platform. I also understand where it comes from. I know that the war in Gaza pushed them there, but it's fascinating to me that they don't feel a sense of existentialism.
What happens when you're on campus and all of the kids that you like on campus, all of your friends,
Ugh.
say terrible things about Israel? And what about if you're in a fraternity, sorority, or in a club and you want to go and do things with other cultural clubs, and all of those cultural clubs refuse to do anything with any Zionists on campus? And what if you go to class and your professor all of the time is talking about terrible things that Jews are doing in the name of Zionism? Like, is it any wonder that they're pushed in this direction? I mean, I would like to think that when I was 21, 22 years old, I would have had the confidence to stand up and to deny this overarching wave.
Yeah, they really see themselves as standing up for the underdog. They see their ideology as righteous and as Jewish and
it's
as
the most altruistic form of hatred that you can possibly have, anti-Zionism. Yes. And I find that I mean, that's its own. We could talk about that as a separate podcast all day long about young people and why it tends to be trending in that direction. Going back to us and to our institution here, again, I think that we are in a favorable position because of the fact that we do have the ability to sort of choose our people and we know these and we know it well. But I was thinking of an analogy about my sense of frustration about this. Rabbi, you know that I am a big fan of shopping at Costco.
yes.
Yes, I'm a good Costco member. Often bring things back from Costco here to the office as well that we enjoy.
I'm a beneficiary of
Yeah.
that.
Now, why do I like going to Costco? Costco's done the work for me. I know when I go to Costco, it's going to be that whoever merchandiser sifted through all of the options, picked something that's going to be at the best quality at the lowest price. I don't have to worry that it's going to be something I'm going to have to return. It's going to be made cheaply as something just I buy online. It's going to be good quality.
Reputation.
And it's going to be it. But they back it up because when I buy something there, I know it's quality and price.
Every single time.
And they've done my homework for me.
And you're saying
HUC has not done my homework for me.
HUC used to be Costco.
And now it's ShopRite. Now I don't know. Now it's like shopping at Shein, online. I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have to return these things. All right, then you can't return it. I can no longer profess faith in the institution that its stamp of approval and seal is worthy of my respect.
I hear you. I'm on board with your frustration.
And my Costco activism.
And mostly your Costco activism. Eating a Costco bar that I took from you right now. But we're not the only institution dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we being HUC is not the only institution that's dealing with this. The Jewish Theological Seminary is dealing with this. And the
RRC, the RRC is by far is the most down this road.
Yes, they haven't. I don't think that they held the container as long as.
I think they've made it their principles that if you are a Zionist, you can't go to RRC.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And I wonder. I think that the price of liberalism is that you lose boundaries. And boundaries are what holds your particularism. Boundaries are what holds your identity. Boundaries are what creates a tribe. Not everyone can be let in to the tribe. Not everyone can be a part of the thing that you're trying to be particular about. And so I think that the great frustration is saying, why are we so afraid to say this is who we are and this is what we believe in and stick to that? Who are we offending by creating boundaries on a religion? Religion's all about boundaries. And I think that, the other side of that is saying, well, yeah, but our religious persuasion is that we're one that has, we have blurred boundaries in the sense that we allow things to ebb and flow and we create the boundaries as we're part of the pursuit. And I think that we're seeing the ramifications of that ideology, that you really do need to define who's in the club, who's outside of the club. We do it in all parts of our lives. And I think that there's such a discomfort with establishing that that's where we stand. And I think that at the conference, that was where people were, I think, struggling and maybe even angry over it. There's
Sure,
like
a lot of a sense of betrayal.
sense of betrayal. Like this is what it means to be a Jew. This is what it means to be in conversation with the Jewish people. This is what it used to mean to be a Reform Jew in particular.
And not just, even if I'm not hiring someone from HUC, you are defining Reform Judaism for the world. And there are many people, even in the Jewish world, who laugh at Reform Jews. I mean, you lived in Israel for all of those years. You know what the average Israeli thinks of Reform Judaism. They think it's like hocus pocus, just pure silliness.
Yeah.
And if we want to be taken seriously as Reform Jews, we feel moves like this are going to take away from that. They're going to besmirch the name of what Reform Judaism is. And when someone joins a Reform synagogue, even today, it's sometimes what people will say, I was surprised I joined a Reform synagogue. I was surprised how, observant or how like Israel-based you were, or the fact that you actually like read Torah. Like they're surprised. They think that basically that Reform Judaism is like Jews for Jesus. And this is a step in that direction.
You know what's so interesting? I want to say two things. Number one is that so many Reform Jews go to Chabad because they want a sense of authenticity. They want a sense of people who are creating boundaries, and this is the thing that we're doing.
They are both inclusive. Yeah. Everyone's welcome, but we're going to stick to our principles.
Yes.
It's not that hard. And you know what? People tend to go to it. And our kids, when they go to university, they kind of admire the fact that the people at Chabad, they are staunchly dedicated to the principles of their movement. You're always welcome to come and join, but we are not going to change who we fundamentally are to make ourselves more appealing to you.
You've also seen that here at the synagogue when we've stood by Jewish principles, values, mitzvot, we've almost never gotten actual pushback on that. People have been respectful and saying, yeah, that's what a synagogue's supposed to do. You set the standard, and we're not going to necessarily adhere to that in every part of our life, but here, yeah, we want a boundary. I wanted to share, the first time that I encountered this truly, and you were there with me. Mm-hmm. We were at HUC right after October 7th.
In New York, yes.
In New York. And I think it was like my fourth week on the job. It was very early on. And we were sitting at a table, all really just reeling from October 7th. I mean, it was so fresh. It was like within days of it having happened. And a student got up at our table. We were at small tables, and just went on a diatribe against Zionism and against Israelis, and kind of giving legitimacy to the atrocities of October 7th.
Not just that, talking about Israel Zionism as the core source of suffering and evil in the world. And when I see a homeless person, that's connected to Palestinianism. And I see, this person downtrodden as Palestinianism, and really the cardinal sin of the world, that which is keeping the world from a sense of redemption and peace, being Israel.
Yeah, it was a messianic anti-Zionism.
Yeah.
And I kind of like don't have clear memories of that because I was so startled and traumatized from what he was saying. But I remember I said something, I pushed back, I got up and I left. And I was sure that he was in the minority.
Or that he might come after you to like just check in, because obviously he'd done something to upset a colleague, a future colleague. Right? I mean, again, the lack of humility. Zionism was not the discussion at the table. He had not been asked.
So he didn't know who we were.
Exactly. For me, like the sheer arrogance of the moment was as offensive as what he actually said.
And I think that that's maybe part of the issue, is that it's a lack of anava, it's a lack of humility. Mm-hmm. If people were going to come and say, you know what, this is what I'm feeling or this is what I believe, because here are the problems with the state of Israel, and here are the problems with this ideology, and like, can we have a discussion? Can we talk about it? Like, I'm deeply Jewish, and I want to have a discussion about our differences. It's not presented as that. It's presented as saying, I know the truth, and you don't understand the truth, and so you're unenlightened because you don't understand what I know.
I'm coming to rabbinical school not to learn more. I'm coming to rabbinical school so I can have the platform, so I can, like a big microphone for the beliefs that I already hold a priori. I'm not here to learn how to talk. I know exactly what I'm saying. I just want to have the endorsement so I can have a better speaker. Um, and it's so upsetting. I want to add one last piece before we go. Not only was there a discussion over the students and their pre-held beliefs, there's also a discussion around what are the students learning about Israel when they are at HUC. And this took several forms. This is the first year in Israel when you're there.
Which is a requirement. You have to live in Israel for a year.
Yes. Although there was during COVID, there's an entire cohort who didn't do that and only went for like the summer for like a month and a half or something like that. There's students talking about that the only form of Zionism that they are exposed to while in Israel is towards the farthest left of the spectrum, sort of in the camp of like Trua or like B'Tselem, breaking the silence of everything terrible that Israel does. But there's no voice coming from either the center or center right. There's no sort of APAC stand with us sort of voice. And if you really are celebrating viewpoint diversity, it seems as though it's not really being practiced in the classroom, at least according to those students. And then this is even more worrisome to me. There was a general feeling that at HUC that the students are not prepared and given the tools to actually have these conversations. And we heard about people shouting down one another at HUC, people forming cliques and not talking to others because of it, a student getting so upset, screaming into the room and then shutting off the lights and closing the door like a little child having a tantrum. That I would think that one of the core skills to develop as a future member of clergy is not just the critical thinking, but how to engage in respectful dialogue with people with whom you disagree. And I think that's not even happening at HUC from what I'm hearing. I think we often have a blind spot. That is that for those of us who liberal Jews, we often look at Israel, and there's between you and I, there's an understood, unspoken love for the state of Israel. So we can talk critically about all of the messiness of Israel as well. That underlying love is not always there. And when all of your talk about Israel, all of the time, is about all of the policies that embarrass you or disgust you in Israel, and when people bring speakers to synagogues, and all of those speakers are from institutions that are criticizing the failing democracy in Israel or the Jewish terrorism in the West Bank, and that's all you're exposing your congregants to, that's all you're exposing your students to, then you really, at a certain point, you are picking away from that underlying love. There has to be a foundation over like why Israel matters in the first place. And I worry those students aren't getting that.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And I think that that's the thread that weaves the Jewish people together. And it's not even like frayed. It's been pulled out completely. I think we're in such a fracture moment where there's not even ability to have conversation. And again, I'm a deep believer in the exchange of thought and not agreeing, but I really struggle with understanding what's going to hold us together as part of the same Jewish people, which have always had different opinions, but I don't even think that we're having the same conversation. I don't even think it's the same religion. I don't think it's the same organization.
I think that one thing I've learned about or realized about myself, and this makes me a little different than some at the conference, is that I did not grow up within a strong Reformed Jewish pipeline. I went to a Reformed Jewish synagogue, but I went to Camp Vermont, to a conservative summer camp. I didn't really do Nifty or any of those things. When I consider myself a Reformed Jew, what I mean by that is that I am Jewish, and I think one should be able to practice their Judaism without necessarily following all of the 613 mitzvot. And I believe in egalitarianism and that we should have female rabbis as well, and that women and men should sit together. And I believe that we should be welcoming, inclusive of the LGBTQ community. That's what reform means to me. But the reform movement, is that something that I want to fight for and want to make sure that Reform Judaism, the one of Isaac Mayer Wise, is that strong? I mean, it's not as important to me. And I very much live in my little world of our synagogue here. And so part of me, and this is the more defeatist part of me, is to say, like, the invisible hand of the market will work itself out here. And if Reform Judaism, if Costco becomes ShopRite, then people are going to start searching somewhere else to buy, and it's going to suffer from its own demise. And it's not really going to affect me. And so should I really worry about it that much? That's a terrible thing to say.
I don't think it's terrible at all. I think you and I subscribe to similar feelings about that. I'm a Jew. I'm not a Reform Jew. I'm not a conservative. I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
That's where I see myself. I'm moved by the principles of movements because I find them interesting, and sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't agree. But somebody said something to me that was really, really striking, and I've been thinking about this, and it's a little dark, but I'll say it anyway. That the fall of the Jewish people is ultimately not going to be assimilation. It's going to be the murder of the Jews. And it will. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And having the state of Israel makes us a little bit safer. It gives us a place where we know that we're allowed to defend ourselves and we're allowed to be unapologetically Jewish. And fighting against our safety is something that is so offensive to me, because we're going to come in and out of assimilation. But saying that the safety of the Jewish people is not a core principle, it's not a core human right, that's offensive to me.
Because someone in a very privileged position is saying that, who's never had to think about it for themselves.
Absolutely. And so that's a really heavy thing to say. I think that might be a hyperbole. There might be truth in that. But it's really, really upsetting to me. And I go back to the conversation I had right after October 7th. It's a place of privilege to not think that it's a place of privilege to think that you're safe when you're not.
Yeah.
And so this is about, it's not about the validity of being Jewish or it's not even about ideology. It's about, are the Jewish people safer because of your opinions or not? And I ultimately think that their opinions make us less safe.
Yeah, I agree. As one sort of epilogue or thing maybe to look forward to, I did reach out to Rabbi Rappel, and I said that I think one thing that could be done short of policy is that when I was at HUC Los Angeles, that a lot of the congregational rabbis were brought to campus to be part of our program, of our practical rabbinics courses, and that at HUC New York, the current sort of structure is that one rabbi alone does all of that. And there really is not much of an opportunity. And if you really want to practice viewpoint diversity, don't you want to bring in a full spectrum of rabbis from the area? You're here in New York. You have available to you rabbis from all over who can speak to all different experiences and viewpoints. And I said, I really think that you need to bring more congregational rabbis onto campus to be parts of panels and discussions and mentorships, and that you are not practicing the actual viewpoint diversity that you preach by having a unique rabbi representative on campus. Let's see.
That's very well said.
If so, perhaps we'll run into each other in the halls. Thanks for engaging in this conversation with me. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.